What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am?
It is one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history.
We have a kidnapping. There's a ransom note here.
A little girl vanishes from home Christmas night.
It's just like you got hit in the stomach. Where's my child?
Hours later, she's found strangled to death.
I couldn't do anything but scream.
Keep your baby close to you. There's someone out there.
Surreal images of the pageant star transfix the nation.
Were you a stage mother?
Probably. What's wrong with that?
No charges have ever been filed. Nobody ever convicted. Tonight, the theories, secrets, and bombshells.
Hurry. Patsy.
Hello, welcome back to my channel, which I talk about true crime stories or chilling dark stories that while I do my skincare. So today we're gonna talk about a case of JonBenet, which is similar to the Madeleine McCann's case that I talked about last week. Just because there is so many theories about this case and it has never been solved, just as the case that we talked about before. I apologize for the set and the quality of the video because it's one of my first videos, so that's what we have. Also, since I will be doing my skincare while I'm talking about true crime, I will put everything in the comments if you want to check that out and see what I'm using while I talk about the true crime. So let's start with today's chilling story while we glow through the chaos. So to start, on December 25th in 1996, the Ramsey family of Boulder, Colorado celebrated Christmas unaware of what was going to happen and that their lives would be shattered by a horribly tragedy. So JonBenét Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen, was found dead in her family's home in what remains one of the most perplexing and controversial cases in American true crime history. So this is one of the most talked about cases that I have seen in at least the US. So this case has been captivating and has haunted a lot of both investigators and the public for more than 25 years. So let's talk about it. JonBenét Ramsey was born on August of 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. So when she was 1 year old, her family moved to Colorado. The family also consisted of JonBenet, Patsy, and his 9-year-old brother, Burke, which will be important later in the story when we talk about all the different theories. So JonBenet was a beauty pageant. That's also why it was one of the most known stories. So she was very well known for this. She was one of the most famous in her time, having won like hundreds of pageants. So her mother, Patsy, was also well known as she had won Miss West Virginia in 1976, which led her to start introducing her daughter to the world of beauty contestants. So that's why she started doing pageants, and that's why she was also very good at it, as her mother did the same. So also, so we know a little more about the family. John was the father and was also a businessman working in the IT services company that's called Access Graphics. So this is important because he won a lot of money by doing this because he was a very important businessman. So this will come important later because they will ask for money, but I will not get too ahead into myself. At first, the case seemed to fit the profile of a kidnapping gone wrong, but as investigators delved deeper into the crime scene, they noticed several red flags. There were no signs of forced entry, into the home. The ransom note itself was highly unusual and seemed almost very theatrical in nature, and perhaps most troubling, the way JonBenet's body was found, because it was found in a very weird way. 911 received a disheartened call stating that their daughter had been stolen, that she had been kidnapped, and that a ransom note had been left. So I'm gonna insert the audio of the 911 call.
Police, what's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. How long ago was it? I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says FBTC. Victory. Please.
A while later, the police arrived at the house. While the police were going back and forth, the family called many friends for support because they needed some support from all the family members and everything to try to find JonBenet, because they didn't know if she was kidnapped really, or the police tried to look for her or see if there was any evidences left. So while the police were going back and forth, the family called many friends for support, and at one point the police told John to search the room the house. While they already did that, they searched up and down for JonBenet, but they couldn't find anything. But in this case, John decided to look for her again with his friend. So the friend and the dad, John, decided to go downstairs, which is suspicious because they supposedly looked everywhere, and the first thing they did when the police officer told them was to go into the basement, which I think I would have probably looked there first, since that's where usually most people go in. If you are like a kidnapper or something, you wouldn't go through the door, you would probably try to go through the garage, through the basement. So I think this is very obvious, but I guess not for everyone. At that moment, he went to the basement and found his daughter's body lying on the floor, covered by a blanket, which he did not find that before. So it's kind of weird because her body was placed in the middle of the room. So it's not like it was hidden somewhere, it was just there. And the thing is, if you searched for your daughter everywhere, it's a little weird that you found her after, just in the middle of the room. They found JonBenet with a cord around her neck, a skull fracture in her back, and a tape on her mouth. So the dad obviously was very shocked and decided to pick her up and carry her upstairs. And if we all here are fanatics about like true crime and different cases, we all know, don't touch the crime scene. I feel like this is common knowledge that everyone knows, but I guess in 1997 it wasn't that known. But still, if you see your daughter on the floor with a skull fracture, everything could be ruined. So I feel like I wouldn't have touched her body, probably. So now let's talk about the actual sin. I said that JonBenet had been found with a cord-like device, like tied around her neck, along with a broken neck and a head injury. So I will try to explain this. There were also signs of a sexual assault, but the most puzzling detail was that the fact that her parents and her brother were in the house during the time of the crime. So what's weird is, if JonBenet was attacked in her house, okay, maybe she probably went down the stairs, tried to get a cup of water, I don't know, and a kidnapper got her, maybe she didn't have time to like scream. They took her to the basement, but still, a skull fracture, you would have to like head first into the floor or something that would punch her, which it's very weird because you would probably hear a noise, anything. But the family and the parents, they never knew. But then if you found the actual, like, a lot of the police were weird about this because they thought obviously if they're home they would have heard something. She was killed in the house. That's very suspicious. They just left her body there. So yes, it is very weird why they would do that, and that nobody else heard absolutely nothing. It's very suspicious. If you actually check the floor plan of the house, since I said before, he was a very known businessman, so they had a lot of money. So the house had a very weird layout. If you didn't know the house, you wouldn't really know where to go, where the basement was, because it was a lot of upstairs, downstairs, but the kitchen would be in one place and one stairs would take you to the other. So it was the layout of the house was very messy. So that's why a lot of people believe that it was an inside job or would be someone that actually knew the people and had been in the house before. So after the autopsy, the death of JonBenet was determined. So they determined that the cord around her neck was the actual result of the strangulation, was the actual like death, the cause of death. The skull fracture also was about like 8 centimeters long, but the primary cause of the death with the autopsy was that asphyxiation due to a strangulation and then the corneal trauma. So that was the actual cause of death that the autopsy said on her report. So now we're gonna talk about all the theories like we did with Madeleine. So there is also a lot of theories about this. The main theories always arise. Let's think that this was also 1997, so probably the police were not that effective. There was no DNA, so let's talk about the theories. Initially, the investigation focused on the family, obviously, particularly Patsy and John Ramsey, through neither was ever formally charged with the crime. So the police began to question the behavior during the investigations, questions about like the timing of their actions, their responses to the crime scene, as I said before, who would touch their daughter's body when it's clearly not natural causes. So they did questions about the timing of their actions, their responses to the crime scene, and also the inconsistencies in their statements, because there was a lot of inconsistencies in the statements. So first of all, we're gonna talk about the intruder theory. So the intruder theory suggests that an outsider unknown to the Ramsey's family entered their home on the night of December 25th, which, by the way, it was Christmas, so worst day to actual murder someone. So in December 25, 1996, kidnapped JonBenet and later killed her. So proponents of this theory point the ransom note, the foreign DNA found on JonBenet's body, and the apparent staging of the crime scene as evidence that an intruder was responsible. One key piece of evidence driving this theory was the ransom note, which seemed to suggest a kidnapping. The note was lengthy, was almost like 3 pages long, which we all know if you are an actual kidnapper, you would just say like, and I'm gonna get your daughter, give me this money, and that's it. But in the ransom note of 3 pages, it explained everything very lengthily with a lot of information, which it's very weird because no intruder would do that in real life. So in the note, it demanded a large sum of money, and it warned that Ramsey family not to call the police. These details pair with the discovery of JonBenet's body in the basement hours later led some to speculate that the kidnapper had staged the scene to throw off investigators, which it could happen. But if that really happened, the intruder was like, "Oh, let me just write a note," so they waste their time. It wouldn't waste a lot of time since he left the body just out in the open in the basement, so it wouldn't take long to them for figure it out that she was actually killed and not kidnapped. So forensic experts had the following statement. Investigators also pointed to the presence of foreign male DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. DNA experts confirmed that the genetic material didn't match any of the Ramsey's family members. This was seen as a breakthrough for those who believed in an intruder might have been involved, suggesting a person outside of the family might have committed the crime. So, moreover, there was no physical evidence, such as fingerprints or hair samples, that definitely pointed to an outsider. The absence of the signs made many investigators question whether the intruder theory could be plausible. So, some have speculated that the perpetrator might have known the family or had access to the house, perhaps even entering unnoticed during a visit. So, okay, theory number 2, which is always one of the theories when your kid has disappeared, the theory of the family members. So the family theory has been one of the most controversial aspects of this case. Initially, investigators focused heavily on JonBenét parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, as potential suspects. This was in part due to the lack of forced entry, leading the police to believe the killer might have been someone inside the house. So the theory suggests that JonBenet's death may have been an accident or the result of a violent altercation, and the family then staged the scene to cover up the crime. Does this sound familiar? Because I feel like I just said the same thing as the case of Madeleine McCann. I don't know why. Every police officer is like, "Oh, your daughter has disappeared, was probably you," or "Your daughter has been killed. Oh, I don't know what happened, but you probably killed her accidentally and then staged the scene," which I think it's just crazy. I'm not saying they never have, because there might be some family members or some creepy dark stories that they actually say that, but that's not usually what happens. Usually your daughter has been kidnapped, and I don't know why always the victim. So the police officer is like, instead of being like empathetic to the person and be like, "Oh, your daughter has disappeared, I'm sorry, we should look at this and this," they're always like, "Oh, it was probably you, wasn't it?" And you're like, what? You shouldn't use the victim and then try to tell them, "Oh, it was you, probably." It doesn't make any sense. So the key moments that fuel suspicion were the actions of the family after JonBenet's body was discovered. So when JonBenet found his daughter's body, he reportedly moved it from the basement and brought it upstairs, which I already said my opinion, who would do that? So before the police had arrived, because as I said, the police officers would go back, come back again, then stage things. Just messy, very messy. So the father found the body and then moved it before the police officers got there. So the scene was technically not the same as it was before. So that the actual crime scene could have been ruined.
To call us. It was leaked by the police that the Ramseys, quote, weren't acting right.
But Woodward says the suspicions flew in the face of the evidence.
There are police reports which say that first night, Patsy and John Ramsey were hysterical with crying. They couldn't stand up, they would fall to the floor.
Very violent to JonBenet's, for example, JonBenet did or said something, and the family member reacted very violently or whatever. Perhaps like a confrontation between JonBenet. Wait, let me finish opening this. There we go. Perhaps a confrontation between JonBenet and her older brother, for example, Burke. But some have speculated that an accidental injury could have occurred, leading to panic and the family trying to cover it up. So this theory was widely discussed, especially since Burke's behavior in the aftermath of the murder was noted as very unusual. Despite this speculation, DNA testing later excluded the Ramseys as suspects, since the DNA found on JonBenet's clothing did not match any of the family members, clearing them of any involvement. However, the idea that someone within the family may have been involved persists in public opinion, largely due to the media portrayal of the Ramseys as prime suspects, because this was such a media or public case that everyone wanted to tell their opinions, and most of them in the media showed as Ramsey as the suspect. So that's why most of the people still believe that the Ramseys did it and maybe hid it some way, or that Burgers, that they know how it happened, but they try to stage it up after. So now this comes to the third theory, that it's kind of mixed with the second one, so it's the accident theory. This is one of the most controversial theories to emerge, is the accident theory. Which suggests that JonBenet's death was the result of a tragic accident, so possibly involving her brother. In a lot of media, they said probably it was the brother, they were playing, something happened, and the parents tried to stage it up because they loved their son. That was the most known theory. So some believe that JonBenet might have been accidentally struck by Burke, either during a fight or while playing. This could explain also the blunt force trauma found on JonBenet's skull, so the 8-centimeter gap in her skull. But however, Burke was 9 years old at the time of the murder, so many have scrutinized his behavior in the days following this, because there is a lot of videos of the police officers questioning Burke. Burke was reportedly very calm during interviews, which some found strange for a child who just lost their sister. In the years that followed, Burke became the focus of speculation about whether he could have caused JonBenet's death or her injuries, either by hitting her with a flashlight or another object during an altercation. This was the most known or the most used theory all around the public eye. So the forensic experts said some proponents of the accident theory believe that the Ramsey family panicked after the incident and decided to cover it up to avoid scandals. So to elaborate, nature of the ransom note could have been an attempt to make it appear as though an intruder was responsible. So in this scenario, the family have believed that the truth would be too damaging, particularly if Burke did it. However, there is no definitive evidence to support this theory. So critics point out that the idea of a young boy causing such a brutal death, because the actual gap in the skull would have to be very strong trauma. So a 9-year-old would have to actually hit her very hard for that to happen. So critics point out that a young boy causing such a brutal death doesn't align with the level of violence present in the crime scene. Also, it doesn't explain where the DNA came from. So you have the trauma and then the DNA, which makes zero sense. So while this theory remains a part of the broader, very broad discussion, the lack of conclusive forensic evidence linking Burke to the crime makes it very controversial and has very different explanations. So now let's talk about the fourth theory, the sexual assault theory, which I believe is one of the most common ones also, and also the one that might actually been the most logical or the most probable, with the intruder and then the sexual assault. So a disturbing and deeply unsettling aspect of the JonBenet's case was the evidence of the sexual assault that was present in the crime scene. So while the primary focus of the investigation has been on the circumstances surrounding her murder, the fact that JonBenét had been sexually assaulted added like another kind of view or another layer of complexity to the case. So some investigators and experts have speculated that the assault may have been committed by someone with prior knowledge of JonBenet or someone close to her, as we talked about it before, because there is a lot of things that they do not make any sense. So the presence of semen on her clothing, which didn't match any of the Ramsey family members, was seen as the potential clue that the killer was an outsider. However, there has never been a breakthrough in that DNA sample because they never found anything in their databases. And also now that it's 2025, there has never been found that DNA in the database. So we still have nothing with that. Others, which I think this theory or this one is crazy. Other experts believe that the sexual assault could have been a part of a ritualistic or sexually motivated crime. So the part of the ritual was because she was set up in a very weird method, right in the middle, with the cord strength. So a lot of people thought maybe it was a weird ritual. I don't think this was the case. Probably he had to leave before anyone would find him. So he just left the body like that. He didn't even try to cover it up. So possibly committed by someone who had been watching her or her family, or something similar with someone with such offenses before. So yeah, like the intruder theory, there is no definitive proof tying an outside individual to the crime. And the idea that the assault was committed by someone with the household remains still a possibility, because they were like, how is it possible that there is no forced entry? Then a lot of the family members were like, oh, we have household people that come here to clean, we give them the keys, we give keys to the family members, we give keys to the neighbors. So a lot of people had those keys. So that's why possibly there was no forced entry, and that's why such weird things happen. Also, there was in the window that was found a little bit open. On the outside of that window, there was spider webs all around the window, and they checked those spider webs and they saw that possibly someone could have gone through the window there, but they checked the spider webs and they were like, wait a minute, the spider webs here, they have been for years. Nobody has cleaned them for years. So there is no possibility of someone going in through this window. And also that window was broken into, but there was like a hole, or like the window was broken. But then the father said, oh no, that was me. I broke it a while back, but I never actually got to cleaning it and make it like actual fix it, the window. So that's why they were like, nobody has gone inside this window. That's impossible because of the spider webs. So that's why they believe that the forced entry was never there. They could probably open one door and they went in, found JonBenet's, because her room was actually one of the first ones you could see when you got up So they would probably see her, took her, and sexually assaulted her probably. Then, with all of these cases, there is always the one of the burglary gone wrong, so the robbery going wrong, which I never think this is very probable theory. Never think it. I don't think nobody comes to rob a house. Just comes in the house. It's like, oh, let me rob. Yes, they have a lot of money, but let me rob this. Oh, there's a child here. Oh, she woke up. Let me just rape her, sexually assault her, and then kill her. I don't think nobody in the right mind, even though you're a criminal, goes there, sees there is some issues, panics, and just takes the child and kills her just so they don't find him. I don't think that's very possible, because she was only she was very young anyway. So if you would steal the things in the house, she would probably not know how to do identification in someone's faces. So it was also at night, probably she wouldn't know. So I don't think this is very probable. But the other theory, which is the least popular, is the robbery. So in this version of events, an intruder entered the Ramsey home with the intention of robbing them. However, the situation escalated, as they always do, and JonBenet was killed during the course of the crime. So the proponents of this theory argue that the killer might have been disturbed while attempting to rob the home. However, the lack of any signs of stolen valuables or any property being tampered with makes this theory less likely. Additionally, the ransom note, which clearly communicated an intent to kidnap JonBenet, doesn't align with the behavior of typical burglary. So the aftermath of an ongoing research and justice for this case, as I said before, it has never been resolved, but we will try to see what has happened since then. So obviously the JonBenet tragic death shattered her family and shocked a lot of people in the nation of the US. So despite the numerous investigations, legal challenges, and media frenzy that lasted for many years, still to this day, justice for JonBenet remains elusive, so there is no concrete anything. Over the years, the case has been has seen a series of twists, and the family found themselves at the center of the storm of every single speculation. So Patsy and John Ramsey were reportedly thrust into the spotlight, facing intense public scrutiny. Many speculated about their involvement, while others argued that the police had focused too heavily on the family instead of actually pursuing the leads outside their home. So the tension between the Ramseys and the police only grew over time, leading to a lack of trust and even a lawsuit against the Boulder Police Department of mishandling the case. So in 2006, Patsy Ramsey, who had battled cancer for several years, passed away, which this makes it even more sad, since she actually never found what happened to her daughter. So she never saw justice for her daughter. Her death only deepened the heartbreak for a family already torn apart by the tragedy of JonBenet. So John Ramsey, however, continued to search for answers in his daughter's case, and he still does this to this day, despite the toll it had taken on his personal life. So John Ramsey remained steadfast in his belief that JonBenet's killer was still out there, and he even began to speak publicly about his determination to find the truth. So in 2008, after years of being publicly accused, the Ramseys the Ramsey family was officially cleared of any involvement in JonBenet's death following the results of new DNA tests that excluded them from any connection to the crime. The Boulder Police Department, under increased pressure, officially cleared the Ramsey's family of any involvement in 2008. So the DNA collected at the crime scene, specifically the foreign male DNA found on JonBenet's underwear, did not match any of the family members. Still, no one was ever arrested for this, and the search for the killer continued. So over the years, countless theories have emerged, each with its own proponents and critics. Some believe that the truth lies in the idea of the actual intruder, a stranger who broke into the home and murdered JonBenet. The theory gained traction after some experts pointed to the foreign DNA found at the scene, suggesting that the killer was someone outside the Ramsey's family. However, this theory has also been criticized for the lack of physical evidence that could directly link an intruder to the crime. So others argue that the family, particularly JonBenet's older brother, Burke Ramsey, may have been involved in an accidental death. Others speculate that a confrontation between the siblings could have led to JonBenet's death, which was later covered up by the parents, but again, no solid evidence had ever been presented to directly implicate him. The strange behavior of Burke and his response to questioning have led some to suspect more than he has ever let on. But there is no forensic evidence that conclusively links him to JonBenet's death, so there is nothing they can actually do. So then there is the question of whether an outsider was involved. Several possible suspects have emerged over the years, including convicted criminals with similar modus operandi, but none have definitely tied to the crime. So this had only fueled the public fascination for this case, as many continue to question whether the real killer is still out or among us. So now the advances in forensic technology, since this was in 97, which there was no DNA. So now, as time has passed, the hope for new leads has been placed in the hands of modern forensic science. DNA technology has advanced exponentially since 96, so allowing for the retesting of all evidence in hopes of finding new clues. So in 2016, the Boulder Police Department announced that they were re-examining the case using the latest DNA techniques for this case to finally be solved. But the advances in genetic genealogy have opened up new possibilities for identifying. So I quote from the forensic expert: advancements in genetic genealogy have opened up new possibilities for identifying unknown suspects. It's possible that we may one day find a match for the foreign DNA found on JonBenet, which could lead to a breakthrough in the case. In my opinion, the intruder or whoever did this probably is already dead, so they will never find who did this. And that's what I think. It's because it's already been 25 years. I don't think an 18-year-old did this, or like a 20-year-old. Probably it was someone that was older, so probably we will never know. So while no new arrests have been made, forensic experts remain hopeful that the case can be solved, given the right advancements and the technology and the investigation of the work. So JonBenét Ramsey's death continues to cast a long shadow over her family, the community, and everyone else. So despite the public obsession with the case and the countless theories that we just talked about, because there are so many and everyone has their different opinions, one thing remains clear. JonBenet was a young girl who deserved to live a full life because she was so young. And actually, she was doing so good for herself. She was doing the things that she loved. And she had a very good family, so she actually deserved to live her whole life like everyone else. So her story has become a symbol of the tragic consequences of violence and the way that the media often complicates justice. Because if we have seen a lot of cases that the media was like, oh, let me talk about this, or look, this person did this, and they're always complicating things. Her story has become a symbol of the tragic consequences of violence and the way that media often complicates justice all the time. So the investigation into her death has raised questions about how law enforcement handles high-profile cases and the way that public opinion impacts an investigation all the time. So JonBenet case remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American criminal history, and I don't think it will be solved. But as a new technology and fresh eyes are applied to old evidence, there remains hope that the truth will one day come to light. What do I know? Maybe it will be solved, because I know cases also that they were closed for years. Someone new came in, looked at the evidence, and like 50 years later it was solved. It was too late now because the person who did it, it was already dead, but at least the family members knew what happened, and they could kind of make peace with it. So let's go to, this is the end of the case. So who actually killed JonBenét Ramsey? Was it someone closer, or was it an intruder who slipped past security unnoticed? We may never know for sure what happened to her, but there still continue to ask questions, pursue evidence also, and keep her memory alive. That's what I'm trying to do, because this case is so old that many people forget about her and forget about different cases. So that's why I want to talk about all the cases that have fascinated me during my years, because at the heart of it all is a young life taken too soon, a family shattered, and the desperate needs for justice. So let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I will always be reading the comments below. Also, if you want me to do a different case, I have an email below in which you can talk to me and recommend me cases. I will look at them and probably be very indulgent in it, and I will find a weird fascination for the case, and I will do a very nice story. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep true crime stories. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep questioning the truth.